We know the Pittsburgh Steelers are winning at least 9 games, but what is the ceiling of the 2024 squad? We're examining the state of the Steelers roster today on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast.
You are Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes, your daily podcast for NFL and college football scouting. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's better than this? It's guys being dudes here on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast. We're the Draft Dudes. I'm Joe Marino from Locked On Bills. He's Kyle Crabbs from Locked On Dolphins. And we are your NFL experts here with you daily to talk team building across the league on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast with the Draft Dudes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to issue a big thank you, shout out, and welcome to our everydayers. Those of you who make Locked On NFL Scouting your first listen every day, we appreciate y'all being here very, very much. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply.
Joseph, happy schedule release day. I see we are both celebrating with our homage windbreakers.
Yeah. Had to
Cody?
do it, man.
Do you hear the swishiness of mine, or?
I don't, but I'm definitely trying to keep my arms very still to avoid that.
True, authentic windbreaker.
Oh, now I hear it. Now you're being very intentional about it. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. But nice little, as 90s babies or 80s babies, as we were kids, this was it. These were it.
Yeah.
See Don Shula and Marv Levy patrolling the sidelines wearing these bad boys. I guess Pittsburgh was what? One head coach ago, 2 head coaches ago. Chuck Noll was probably the guy that was wearing the Steelers one of these back in those days when we were kids growing up. The gold standard of continuity across the league, the Pittsburgh Steelers.
There's no doubt about it. They won a lot of games, won a lot of Super Bowls, and we'll see what this team can get done with a Super Bowl winning quarterback and Russell Wilson taking over.
You did the thing. Okay.
We'll get there, but welcome in Steelers Nation. What are we doing here, Kyle Crabbs?
So we looked at all the players on Pittsburgh's roster as things currently stand. And the objective was to watch through an evaluation eye to put players on the roster into buckets, and that be cornerstones, quality starters, adequate level starters, replacement level players, quality depth options, rookies, incomplete evaluations, young players that haven't really played enough, non-roster caliber players, and practice squad developmental types. And we classify all the players on each of the rosters, and each team gets its own day in the sun here on Locked On NFL Scouting. And then at the end, there is numerical values that are attached to all these players with positional weight, and it gives us the roster power rankings at the start of training camp when we're done in 7.5 weeks. So Pittsburgh, it's your time. We watched your team. We familiarized ourselves or refreshed ourselves, because we did this last year, with your scheme. There's some newness for Pittsburgh from a scheme perspective. So you're kind of, from an evaluation eye, looking at it a little bit differently. And this is what we got for Pittsburgh.
So Arthur Smith takes over as the offensive coordinator for Pittsburgh, which is going to be interesting. And you saw late in the season, this rushing offense really came to life. I mean, over the last, 8, 9, 10 weeks of the season, it was like the best rushing offense in the NFL. And, of course, they're returning the running backs in Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren, but quite a bit different here when it comes to this offensive line. And I think it's all good, no longer having to rely on Mason Cole, who I think was a liability for them, and being able to get a guy like Zach Frazier in the draft, who I think should be a plug-and-play starter for them. We both love Troy Fautanu out of Washington. To bring him in and potentially allow Dan Moore to become a depth player for you, and you have a tackle tandem of Fautanu and Broderick Jones to go with 2 good guards in James Daniels and, of course, Isaac Siamalu. So I like the opportunity for this team to continue to run the ball very, very well. Hopefully Arthur Smith can elevate and build upon about what they did towards the end of last season, because that became literally the reason why they won games. They didn't get to the playoffs. They didn't go on that run because of great quarterback play. So I think you look at this and say, okay, can we run the ball well? And can we get better quarterback play. No matter what you think of Russell Wilson or Justin Fields, no matter what you think of them, they're better than what Pittsburgh had last year. So you got better at quarterback. Yeah. And hopefully you're better on the offensive line and you can run the ball like you did at the end of last season.
Well, I think, Dan Moore played 953 snaps offensively last year. He moves into kind of the swing offensive line spot. I think you look at who they went out and pursued, particularly in the draft with Frazier and Fautanu and Mason McCormick as three names. The strengths mirror one another, right? The strengths of those players is the athleticism and what they're able to do in the run game and winning gaps, but also some power at the point of attack. And you check that with Broderick Jones and what he showed at Georgia and what he showed in pretty significant volume of snaps this past season. I think he was the fourth highest snap taker for Pittsburgh's offensive line last year. You see the vision, right? You see who we want to be. It's going to be centered in, as every Arthur Smith offensive line, whether it was in Tennessee or whether it was in Atlanta and now in Pittsburgh, that's the common thread. And when I look at Pittsburgh and I look at their offensive depth chart between the offensive line, I don't think it's quite as deep as last year. They made some decisions to move on from some players versus like when we did this last year in the summertime. Right. And, Kevin Dotson goes on and cashes in a big check after moving on to the Rams. So good for him. But it seemed like it wasn't necessarily going to happen in Pittsburgh. So that happens sometimes. But the offensive line, the backs, and the tight ends, I think is where you have foundationally the identity of what you're going to be offensively. And then you have a decision to make on who's going to start at quarterback. And then you have the outside player in George Pickens, who you want to run the play action off of that and take shots down the field. I think the strengths of both Justin Fields and Russell Wilson as quarterbacks would involve pushing the ball down the field in a vertical plane. And maybe whoever catches the most chemistry with Pickens is going to determine where that ultimately goes throughout the course of the season this year.
I'm glad you brought up the tight ends because I love what this tight end room can be. I thought the world of Pat Freiermuth going into this season, and of course he played through some injuries, but I thought you saw some flashes of what he's capable of. And I think the combination of his injuries and the quarterback play took away from him taking another step after what we saw in 2022. But Darnell Washington, dude, like everything that you were excited about him as a guy that can win the edge as a blocker in the run game, man, he does it. He can do it. And I think that's such an asset to what this team wants to be offensively. And then Connor Heyward provides a lot of versatility as another option in that type of role. So it's got to come together, right? A new scheme, a new quarterback, new pieces on the offensive line. But I think there's a really intriguing ceiling with this rushing offense, of course, with a pair of backs in Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren, who, like, maybe you don't think the world of either player, but I think as a tandem, they play off each other well. Jaylen Warren gives you that pass catching ability. I thought he caught like 63 passes last year. And they both were productive running the ball, and they got him going pretty well. I mean, some ball security issues there with Warren maybe took away from some of his opportunity, but I like the idea of this rushing offense. I think where you start to have questions about this offense is, all right, do we have enough here in terms of the passing game? Is there enough punch?
Well, you're just going to have to play a certain kind of script to win, right?
Yeah, it's
and
tough.
If the script doesn't play out that way and you're down 14 points in the first quarter, Pittsburgh's going to, I think, have a tougher road than a lot of teams being able to come back. Now, I think maybe that's where I feel strongly about who I would be playing at quarterback. I think there's some elements there, but that's a whole other. We'll come to complete consensus in segment 3 about the quarterback position, because I know we want to talk a little bit about Russ, but just that decision in general, I think, can push the offense in one of a couple different ways. And but I agree with everything you're saying with the pass catches in particular. I love Roman Wilson, right? But realistically, Roman coming in as a 3rd-round draft pick in year 1, I'm looking at the depth chart. You're the second best wide receiver on the team. Do I like that situation for your pass catchers? Probably not. I think there's more that would be needed here. Silver lining, I expect we'll see some wide receivers that do end up getting cut loose after this big spike in rookie contracts with bunch of these 15 wide receivers, 16 wide receivers go in the top 100. We've already kind of seen like Zay Jones got cut.
Mm-hmm.
There's some guys that are out there. You just saw Odell and Tyler Boyd come off the market. So maybe some of these other guys that come out, Pittsburgh can be in the market for them between now and the start of the season.
All right, I got some thoughts I'll share on this receiver core on the other side of it. We'll get into the defense as well, so be sure to stick with us. It's winner take all time in the NBA and the NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook.
So I think I cut you off there. You made it pretty clear you had something in your heart you wanted to get out.
Well, I think there's a big problem with this Pittsburgh offense, and it is the receiver position. Like, to me, this is not good enough. I like what they have in George Pickens, who I think has become the type of player that you feel like is going to reach his potential. And I'm very impressed with the production he's had in 2 seasons with the quarterback play that has existed. So that's impressive to me. But, like, what else do we have here? I mean, I like Roman Wilson, rookie, and I think you have a bunch of replacement level guys. Like, if Van Jefferson was going to be a thing, it would have happened by now.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe
Quez
Calvin
Watkins.
Austin. Quite right. Like, what are we doing here? This is a team that this is a team here that I think has to find an answer here at receiver. Another guy here. And so whether that is pursuing one via trade, and one, what do I say all the time? Wide receivers get traded. Like, Pittsburgh's got to be in on this, or there's some availability that comes through. I'd like to see them add more here. Maybe I'm sensitive to this because all anybody wants to talk about is the Bills and their receivers. And I look at this and I'm like, can we have some energy on this? Because this is not good enough to me.
So we agree George Pickens is a quality starter at this point,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Okay. It actually is pretty funny how it mirrors the Arthur Smith Atlanta Falcons wide receiver rooms, doesn't it?
That's a good take. That's a good
The
take.
the Drake London, young, big-bodied, catch point, ball skills, athletic, height, weight, speed type guy. And then everybody else is like, I don't care, right? Now,
but what if you did? What if you did care?
What if you did? But is the offense really going to maximize it anyway? Like, are we not just going to come out here and run a bunch of 12 and 22 and personnel and have all these backs on the field simultaneously? And
yeah, but
Connor
11's
Heyward with
still
a
going to
lineman
be their primary formation, right? Like, it's going to happen.
I don't know. Not if they keep this group.
Well, they shouldn't if this is the group that they roll with.
And I think if you ask me to put the best 11 guys out on the field, I would say Freiermuth, Washington, Harris, Warren, Patterson are all better options than the second wide receiver right now. So I just think that, yeah, you'll play with 2 wide receivers, but I can foresee them trying to mitigate this with a lot of extra tight end and back, especially a weapon like Cordarrelle Patterson. And that's fine as long as George Pickens doesn't miss any time. Because if George Pickens misses any time, now you're in big trouble.
Yeah, it's going to be tough.
And that's going to be a theme on the defensive side of the ball for Pittsburgh too.
All right, so we're going to kind of save the quarterback conversation for a little bit later.
Yeah.
But defensively, man, this is where you find the cornerstones. I have questions about the depth. But TJ Watt, Cam Heyward, Alex Highsmith, Minkah Fitzpatrick.
Studs.
Oh, man. And now you add Patrick Queen at linebacker. Peyton Wilson is a 3rd-round pick. There's a lot to like about the starters on this defense, outside of maybe corner.
Do you want to take a moment and clear your throat? No.
We're battling today, brother. I don't know what's going on.
Go ahead. Take a moment.
I think I did.
I'll talk for a second.
Thank you.
I thought you did the first time too.
Oh, man. Struggling here.
Alex Highsmith's development is an outstanding, and obviously he got paid before this past season, but he really vindicated playing as many snaps as he did. He played over 900 snaps this past season for Pittsburgh, and having a duo like that of Watt and Highsmith and getting Cam Heyward back completely healthy, hopefully for an entire season, it's the identity of your defense, right? You got Minkah with all the range that he has back there. I really like the addition of Deshaun Elliott as the second safety. I know that was an area that we had some questions with this time last year for Pittsburgh, and Elliott is coming off a really strong season in Miami. Not a lot of ball production, but as a low safety who can tackle.
Yeah.
And I think that's a theme when you look at the second level, the underneath players when Pittsburgh plays zone coverage, whether that's Queen or Holcomb or Roberts or Elliott as somebody who's rotating down when they play cover 3. A lot of those guys tackle really well in space. And I know Peyton Wilson with the arm length and the wingspan, it's like a very, very, very low number. So that kind of hurts maybe if you're projecting him to the next level, but he's got that dynamic range. But like Roberts and Holcomb, I think those two guys combined have not had a double-digit missed tackle rate in the past 3 years.
Yeah.
So Elliott being a strong tackler for when you play and accentuate Minkah and have him be the post safety, I think Elliott really matches well with them being a team that can limit explosive plays when they rotate to single high coverage because of all the good tacklers that they have on the second level.
Yeah, it's a good call out on the tackling. They've been consistent with that for a number of years. Another thing that I really like about this defense is 2 young players, 2 second-year players now in Keeanu Benton and Joey Porter Jr., who we've already labeled. I don't want to speak for you, but I'm pretty sure you did as well. We've already labeled them as adequate level starters. And I think obviously the arrow is pointing up for both of those guys. I thought they were both pretty close to first-round talents in that draft class, and they were able to get both these guys. They got playing time. Benton has really showed himself as a pass rusher. And Joey Porter Jr., got plenty of run. I thought he got better and better as the season moved along. And now, obviously, it's kind of his situation here to be like their guy. But it feels like he's got the makeup to do it. So starters here are good, man. I get nervous about depth, whether that's corner, obviously. Like safety depth feels pretty good with KZ as an option. Like I feel like you're probably okay at linebacker, but maybe you wish you had a little bit more on the edge. Like if you lose Watt or Highsmith, like you got to sign Marcus Golden. One of my notes that I have is like, get Marcus Golden back on this football team, not only as a third rusher because you need one, but in case you do have an injury to Watt or Highsmith, you'd hate to not have a guy like that waiting in the wings.
Well, I guess what's interesting about Pittsburgh for me is a lot of the depth positions that they have outside of safety and linebacker are youthful players, right? Right now it's Nick Herbig, potentially, and showed some promise.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, it's fair. Yeah.
But what do you really have? You really can't definitively say based off of 191 defensive snaps. Now, he played special teams out the wazoo. He played 350 plus snaps on special teams. So he's going to play. But what's the ceiling there if Watt or Highsmith goes down and that has to be your other starter? I don't know. At corner behind Dante Jackson and Joey Porter, it's Trice.
Who's the slot? Rush. Who's the slot for this team?
It probably should be Dante Jackson, right?
And figure out Rush on the outside, potentially.
If you want to try to get Darius Rush, who was a 5th-round pick by the Colts and didn't make it because he got beat out by a 7th-round kid, and then you grab him, and he played like very, very limited snaps. I think it was under 50 snaps for them defensively, but like got into some game action as a young player out of South Carolina that it kind of matches the physical profile of Joey Porter. So I look at their depth issues and I'm like, okay, I can kind of see where like, if you feel really good about Herbig or Rush or Trice, maybe it's less important for you than it is for us, but just off of the sample size that we have to look at and to understand these players from afar, depth at corner, depth at edge, depth at wide receiver are big time question marks across the whole roster for me.
I would agree with you on that. All right, if I can get through this read, we will talk about the quarterbacks and come to consensus on the other side of it. So be sure to stick with us. Folks, you know what's going down tonight. It's the NFL schedule release. There's so many high-profile games, and maybe you want to get to some of those games this year. Well, you got to check out Game Time. Game Time is the fast and easy way to get tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. So download this app. It's awesome. It's easy to navigate. They give you last-minute ticket deals, flash deals, all-in prices, so there's no surprises when you get to checkout. They tell you the full price right up front, a best price guarantee. They give you a seat view. They give you everything. So check it out. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
All right. I guess I'll tee this up if you want to take a drink or go to the bathroom or do whatever you need to do. We got to come to consensus on a couple of different players that we did not bucket, and we will save you the full quarterback, this bucket, running back, this bucket, offensive tackle, this bucket. And that will all kind of come to light when we do the roster rankings at the end of.
Oh, but also quick timeout. Friday.
Oh, yeah.
We are tier making every position group within the division. So this has been AFC North week. Tomorrow we're doing the last place Cincinnati Bengals.
Wow.
Yeah, come on, man. I got to
throw that in there.
Got to come. The Pittsburgh Steelers fans were happy that I said that, okay? All right? I know my audience today. So we're going to get through them tomorrow. And then on Friday, we are going to go through and rank, all right, 1 through 4, quarterback, running back, tight end, all the stuff. So don't miss that.
And then at the end of the rainbow, when we do all the divisions, then we'll have the full 32 team, and we'll talk about the dynamics of how they rank. Yeah. Quarterback, for me, I feel very strongly that Justin Fields should be the player that gets the run. Where you consider Russell Wilson and what he was the past 2 seasons with the campaign to let Russ cook, and then that didn't go well, and then Sean Payton, and the execution of Sean Payton's offense was just not at a very high level.
Horrible.
And I think Arthur Smith being a run-heavy offense would help that issue, but at the same time, if you have 2 reads and you're rolling out, and you decide not to take the first read, or you're slow making the decision on the first read, I think that question exists for both of these quarterbacks as far as the execution of an offense and the progressions and the reads within it. Ergo, I would want the player who has the larger multiplier in what they do in the other areas of the position. If you run nakeds and rollouts and you're getting the quarterback on the edge, Russell can still move. I would want Justin Fields doing that because he's a more dynamic player in that regard. I would, if I have questions at wide receiver and I'm going to run a lot of 2 back and 2 tight end personnels, want the quarterback that gives me more in the quarterback run game to be the quarterback that's the starting quarterback for me. I think you have to an opportunity with Justin Fields to evaluate him and make a decision on whether there's a future with him as compared to Russell Wilson, who's on a 1-year deal for vet minimum because Denver's paying the whole thing.
Right.
But where is that path going to take you long term? Honestly. So for me, I look at the run game dynamics, the pass game dynamics. When the concerns with Justin Fields, I have the same concerns with Russell Wilson, and then the longevity opportunity here. And Justin Fields for me is the open and shut. Like, that's who I would want at quarterback if I were a Steelers fan trying to get hyped up for this season.
I align with you. I don't think they're going to do that. I think they're going to, they're going to play Russ at least until that doesn't work, or maybe it does work and they just roll with him. But we've talked about this a lot on this podcast. I look at Russell Wilson as a fundamentally flawed quarterback in how he plays the game. He's a guy that, literally either chucks it down the field or holds onto the ball forever and dumps it to a running back. He doesn't run the offense.
Right.
And so that's challenging. And because of that, I think there's a lot of variance in outcomes. He invites a lot of chaos, and that's challenging. I would want, like you mentioned there, there's a ceiling with Justin Fields. I think there's more to unlock. There's more athleticism. I just feel like there's more there that I'd want to try out. And maybe he is your guy long term, but you're not going to find out if he doesn't play. And so give yourself that opportunity to assess what he can be and play him. Again, I fear that's not what they're going to do. I'm completely aligned with you on this, though.
Okay. So how do you classify? Because I agree with you. You said something very key there. Russell Wilson is a fundamentally flawed quarterback.
Right.
And I agree with you.
Yeah.
Because there's people looked at the stats last year and they're like, oh, see, it got better, or it's a certain threat. He didn't run the offense.
Right.
So how do you classify that? Like, I think there's an argument to be made, well, with the arm strength and his ability to extend plays and navigate the pocket, and he's an experienced player, you can put him in an adequate starter bucket. But like, I fundamentally have a hard time with that. If we're going to sit here and say, yeah, he didn't really run the offense the way he's supposed to say that's an adequate level starter as a quarterback.
I wish I had a great selling point for you. I mean, obviously he has started a ton of games in the NFL. Mm-hmm. He's had a lot of success in the NFL, but the last 3 years, I feel like the wheels have fallen off. And it almost felt like Seattle was keenly aware of Russ and what he, you know what I mean? What he is, what he wasn't, and made it work. And you remember when there was like so much of the let Russ cook thing happen, and then simultaneously you see them like, we need to run the ball. Like they know that. Yep. They knew that. And since he's been let free, well, now he's in situations that don't know how to work with him. And I wonder if Russell Wilson looks like $1 million in practice. Like he does run the offense in practice. But then when the bullets are flying, he just kind of reverts to this very unique style of play. All of this to say that, I mean, if we're going to put Jameis Winston as a sufficient level starter, don't you feel like maybe Russell Wilson?
Didn't we not, though? Didn't you talk me out of it?
Yeah, I did talk you out of that.
So do we just put Russell Wilson in quality depth and say, well, there's a lot of starting experience here if that's your backup quarterback? Sometimes you like the backup quarterback to have the chaos merchant element to him for unpredictability.
I just wouldn't sign up. I wouldn't sign up for this if I was a team. You know what I mean?
I mean, at the same time, we saw what Kenny Pickett looked like on tape. And for vet minimum, I probably would sign up for Russell Wilson as vet minimum. But it would be to be the backup to the former top 10, top 15 overall pick who you're trying to figure out what you have here and you traded for. I would argue Russell Wilson in the quality depth bucket.
Well, and for the purposes of the way that we do the calculations, it's actually inconsequential if we what we label
specifically.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, we rank them in order, and then there's a point value based on where they slot in order. So we'll do that at some point. But I think, I think this conversation was good to get to the challenge. Like it's just challenging. It is. It's challenging to consider how to qualify what Russell Wilson is at this point in his career.
Okay, so who else do we need to come to consensus to?
Was there anybody else? Or Isaiah Loudermilk? We were going to talk about this.
Line
yeah,
depth.
Yeah.
In its totality, because I was higher on Dean Lowry and you were higher on Montravius Adams, and Isaiah Loudermilk also is kind of like you're like, yeah, he executes what he's supposed to execute, but he doesn't really ever make any plays or anything like that. So how do you reconcile that? So I think that's they're fair questions about the interior defensive line depth. Dean Lowry, I know you made the point he's been quiet the last few years, but
he gets some injuries last year as well.
Mm-hmm. But experienced player, fairly athletic player for his stature. I think there is more of a ceiling for him than Loudermilk as far as making some plays. And he actually, in his career, has made some plays. So that for me was kind of where I justified Dean Lowry is if he was a part of your rotation and he played 300 snaps, you'd feel like that's a good player to have as a part of that mix for you.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I can appreciate that in an odd front defense, what he has to do there. And I think from Travius Adams, I don't think he's like a very clean fit to this defense, but as a sub interior rusher, I think he's provided some value in that capacity. I don't think you don't want him anchoring against the run, but he can penetrate a little bit when you want that skill set.
Well, and the good news is with Benton and Ogunjobi and Heyward and Loudermilk on early downs.
Yeah.
You got guys that. So you want to go quality depth across the board for them?
I think so.
It's an important distinguishment to make because the way that we grade your rosters, there's the top 3 edge, the top 3 interior guys, and the top 3 interior guys would be Heyward, Benton, and Ogunjobi. And then we have a flex spot for the 7th defensive lineman, and we take your best one. So we want everybody to grade to the best of their ability. So having a quality depth player there will give you a certain score versus if we couldn't put players in that bucket and it was lower tiers, then your outcome for your defensive line grade would be lower. So I think we're good with that.
Don't you have to say what you have to say about Landon Roberts?
Yeah. He might be the 4th best linebacker on this team.
Well, I think that's very true. I would,
but he's not gonna get 4th best linebacker on the team snaps, right?
Because they're gonna fire him downhill and let him shoot gaps and be physical. Don't ask him to cover. Don't ask him to change directions.
He should never see the field on 3rd downs.
Right.
But he has gone on to make a very nice career for himself. In the past 2 seasons, he's had triple-digit tackles. But he's doing that in spite of playing less than 60% of the snaps. He's never played 60% of the snaps in the season defensively for a team ever in his entire career. That's because he can't play 3rd downs. So
I mean, I've enjoyed him as a 3rd down player when my
as a team who has the likes of Cole Beasley and Dawson Knox and now James Cook and Dalton Kincaid as all these middle of the field targets. I would be thrilled to the moon if I lined up and I saw big old 52 over there on the other side. Is he wear 52 in Pittsburgh?
I don't think he does.
50. Sorry. He was Dolphins, played for like 4 years with 52. So that's always the number that sticks to me. But big old 50 in black and yellow over there. Say, okay, I know where I'm going if we got to work into the middle of the field progressions and I'm not just going to work outside the numbers. He hits like a ton of bricks and he will fly around. But as you said, if you got to force him to get off the tracks and work in space, it's a total mismatch. So that's where I really love the Peyton Wilson drafting for them as the polar opposite kind of player. As far as like even the build, right? Roberts is built low to the ground and super dense. And Wilson doesn't necessarily have the anatomical length and wingspan, but he's this long, lean body type that can really run. He's almost built more like a safety. So Roberts will play meaningful snaps, and I understand why. But I think guys that are just downhill plugs aren't super valuable in today's game and aren't super hard to find. But the production, you give him credit for the production, he tackles well. So we have him in quality depth.
Maybe in this division, right? It feels like maybe it makes a little more sense than other spots. But Peyton Wilson, what a great spot for him. All things considered, because the only concern there is the injuries. The guy could play, and if it works out, him and Patrick Queen could be one heck of a tandem. You
end up with going against 12 personnel teams, and you got 2 linebackers on the field.
Huge,
and it's Queen and Peyton Wilson.
They know they're going to play Baltimore and Cleveland. They know,
right?
Yeah,
right. All right, that's going to do it for us here on Locked On NFL Scouting. I'm Kyle Crabbs. He is Joe Marino. You can find us on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. We're going to wrap up here on today's show with the Pittsburgh Steelers. We got the Bengals coming tomorrow to finish AFC North week, so you have that to look forward to. Happy schedule release day. May you get all the games you wish for at the times and days you want. And we will be back again tomorrow.